There is a moment in every life when patience becomes more valuable than gold, and most of us discover it too late or resist it too long. We live in an age that worships speed. We want the promotion before we've built the character to sustain it. We want the marriage before we've healed the wounds that would otherwise poison it. We want the harvest before we've done the quiet, unglamorous work of planting. And yet across centuries, across scripture, across the hard-won wisdom of people who have actually lived long enough to watch their own dreams unfold, one truth keeps surfacing again and again. Timing is everything. Not effort alone. Not even faith alone. Timing. The right thing, done at the wrong time, can destroy what the right thing was supposed to build. Bishop T.D. Jakes, one of the most influential voices in American ministry over the last 3 decades, has spent much of his preaching life returning to this idea, and one of his most powerful explorations of it comes from a very old story found in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13. It is the parable of the wheat and the tares. A man plants good seed in his field. While everyone sleeps, an enemy comes and quietly sows weeds among the wheat, then disappears into the night. Nobody notices right away. It is only later, when the wheat begins to sprout and grow, that the weeds also appear, tangled among it, indistinguishable at first glance. The servants run to the master, alarmed, and ask where the weeds came from. He tells them plainly, an enemy did this. They offer to pull the weeds out immediately. But he stops them. He tells them to wait. Pulling the weeds now, he says, would uproot the wheat along with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. Only then, when everything has matured and can finally be told apart, will the weeds be gathered and burned, and the wheat brought safely into the barn. It is a simple story on the surface, the kind children learn in Sunday school. But sit with it long enough, and you start to see something much deeper happening underneath the words. This is not merely a story about agriculture. It is a story about timing, about the discipline of restraint, and about the uncomfortable reality that good and bad often grow up side by side in the same life, in the same family, in the same season, and cannot always be separated the moment we wish they could. Consider first the simple fact that most people miss when they rush through this passage. The weeds were not planted before the wheat. They were planted after. The enemy did not act first, and then wait to see what would grow. He waited until there was something worth attacking. This detail matters more than it might seem. It suggests that opposition, difficulty, and hardship are not random. They tend to arrive in proportion to potential. The greater the promise on a life, the greater the resistance that life will eventually meet. This is not meant to frighten anyone. It is meant to reframe how we interpret our own struggles. If you have ever wondered why your path seemed harder than everyone else's, why obstacles kept appearing right as you started to gain momentum, it may not be a sign that something is wrong with you. It may be a sign that something valuable was already growing, and the resistance arrived precisely because the seed was good. The second lesson hidden in this story is one that runs against nearly everything modern culture teaches us about how to handle conflict. When the servants discover the weeds, their instinct is to act immediately. Pull them up. Fix the problem. Restore order right now. It is a completely understandable impulse. Most of us feel it constantly. Something is wrong in our lives, and every fiber of our being wants to correct it on the spot. But the master's answer is startling. No, not yet. If you pull the weeds now, you will destroy the wheat along with them, because their roots have already become tangled together underground where you cannot see. This is one of the most important truths about how struggle actually works in a human life. Whatever damage was done to you, whatever dysfunction was planted in a difficult childhood or a broken relationship or years of hardship, it did not stay isolated. Over time, it wove itself into the same soil where your gifts, your character, and your calling were also growing. The two became entangled, not because they belonged together, but because they existed in the same space during the same season. This is why sudden, forceful attempts to rip out the pain in our lives so often cause collateral damage. People try to fix everything at once, purge every flaw, sever every unhealthy pattern overnight, and in doing so they sometimes tear out the very qualities that were quietly being formed alongside the pain. Resilience, empathy, depth, wisdom earned the hard way. The lesson is not that we should tolerate what is harmful forever. It is that healing, like harvest, has its own timing, and forcing it prematurely can cost us more than the pain itself ever did. There is a third layer to this story that deserves attention, and it concerns the difference between corruption and destruction. The enemy in the parable never had the power to destroy the wheat outright. Its nature could not be changed. A seed of wheat planted in the ground would still come up as wheat, no matter what grew beside it. What the enemy could do, however, was corrupt the environment surrounding it, making the process harder, slower, more exhausting, more confusing. This distinction matters immensely for how we understand our own setbacks. Very few people who ultimately succeed at anything worthwhile do so without encountering forces that tried to complicate their path. The question was never whether difficulty would show up. It always does. The real question is whether that difficulty had the power to destroy the outcome, or only the power to make the road longer and harder than it needed to be. Most of the time, it is the latter. What was blessed in the beginning tends to remain blessed, even when the middle of the story looks discouraging. And this brings us to what may be the hardest lesson of all, the one Bishop Jakes returns to again and again in his teaching: the wisdom of waiting. In a culture obsessed with instant results, waiting is often mistaken for weakness or passivity. But in this story, waiting is presented as an act of tremendous faith, arguably harder than any dramatic gesture of action would have been. The master does not tell his servants to do nothing, because nothing needs to be done. He tells them to wait because acting too soon would cause more harm than the original problem itself. There is real courage required to sit still when everything in you is screaming to fix things immediately. It takes more discipline to wait through an uncomfortable season than it does to charge into it with force, because waiting requires trusting an outcome you cannot yet see, based on a promise you were given long before the difficulty ever arrived. Anyone who has built something lasting, whether a marriage, a career, a ministry, or simply a healed sense of self, knows this rhythm intimately. Seeds do not become bread overnight. First they must be planted, then they grow downward before they ever grow upward, forming root systems invisible to anyone watching from the surface. Then they must be harvested, then threshed, then ground, then baked. Every stage takes time, and every stage involves labor that does not immediately show a visible result. This is precisely why so many people give up in the middle of the process. They confuse the absence of visible progress with the absence of any progress at all, when in reality the most important work, the root work, is happening exactly where they cannot see it. There is also something worth noting about how the parable ends. The wheat and the weeds are not separated based on how the planter feels about the timing. They are separated at harvest, a moment determined by maturity, not by urgency or frustration. This offers a corrective to one of the most common mistakes people make when they are struggling, allowing frustration to dictate decisions that should be dictated by timing instead. Frustration is a feeling, and feelings are notoriously unreliable narrators of how much time is actually left before things change. Many people abandon a calling, a relationship, or a dream in the exact season right before it was set to bear fruit, simply because their patience ran out slightly before their harvest arrived. The tragedy in these situations is rarely that the promise was false. It is that the timing was misjudged, usually by mere moments, and the outcome was lost not because it wasn't real, but because it wasn't given the chance to fully mature. What makes this parable so enduring, and what makes Bishop Jakes's teaching on it resonate with people far outside any single denomination, is that it speaks to something universal about the human experience of struggle. Nearly everyone, regardless of their background or beliefs, has experienced a season where good and difficult circumstances seem to grow up together, tangled and inseparable, with no easy way to tell which parts of the struggle would ultimately produce something valuable and which parts were simply noise to be endured. The temptation in that season is always the same: act now, fix it now, uproot it now. And the wisdom offered here is equally consistent across generations: not yet. Let it grow. Trust the process even when you cannot see beneath the soil. The harvest will come, and when it does, everything that once looked confusing and entangled will finally be sorted with clarity that impatience could never have provided. In the end, the story of the wheat and the tares is not really about agriculture at all. It is about the discipline required to endure an unfinished process without destroying it through premature intervention. It is about recognizing that hardship arriving alongside progress is not evidence of failure, but often evidence that something worth attacking has already taken root. And it is about learning, sometimes the hard way, that the most powerful thing a person can do in certain seasons of life is nothing at all. To wait, to trust, to remain planted, and to let time do what only time can do.